Hello and welcome to episode 4.11, the April 2nd, 2025 Rainforest edition of Notes from the Isle Seat, the podcast that covers the arts in northern Chautauqua County, sponsored by the 1891 Fredonia Opera House. My name is Tom Laughlin, and I'm your host as we bring you news and information about arts events at the Opera House and around the region, including interviews with artists and creators across the county. Well, here I am in the Pacific Northwest, in the city of Olympia, capital of the state of Washington. And yes, it's raining. The Olympic Peninsula is the home of the nation's only rainforest in the 48 contiguous states, and I can vouch from experience that it does rain here quite a bit. It's quite the change from the desert, where we saw next to no rain to speak of for almost 10 weeks. While the return to gray, cloudy skies is a bit of a bummer, the payoff is that spring is blooming here in the Pacific Northwest, with plenty of green and yellow and pink, and we're just in time for the cherry blossoms that bloom on the state capitol grounds. A fair trade-off, I think, and soon we'll be wending our way back home through the Rockies and the Great Plains, checking out all the new life springing from the earth. It's a magnificent country we have here, and I can only hope we aren't foolish enough to destroy it for future generations. Before we begin, I want to welcome some new partners to the podcast. Notes from the Isle Seat is now being broadcast over the airwaves, thanks to new partnerships with WCVF 88.9 FM, the campus and community radio station on the Fredonia campus, and WRFA 107.9 FM, broadcasting from the Reg Linné Center in Jamestown, New York. Both stations stream via the internet as well as broadcast over the airwaves, so you have more ways to catch the podcast. WCVF is broadcasting the podcast Wednesdays at 6 p.m., while WRFA will be broadcasting the podcast Fridays at 3 p.m. We're grateful to both these fine radio stations for helping us get the podcast out to more people throughout Chautauqua County. Check the show notes on the podcast website for links to the radio stations, where you can get more information.
I think you better go away somewhere.
Oh, but I've only just come back.
Monica, come here at once.
What on earth's the matter?
Have you or have you not ever seen me overact?
Frequently.
Conspiracy! I knew it!
As a matter of fact, you're overacting now.
Oh, very well, I give in. Everybody's against me.
The wit and polish of Nöel Coward will be on display at the 1891 Fredonia Opera House as it presents the National Theatre's 2019 production of his comedy Present Laughter, starring Andrew Scott, on Saturday, April 5th at 1 p.m. It took a bit of doing, but thanks to a long-time associate, I managed to track down Mr. Craig Johnson, a Nöel Coward expert and enthusiast who lives and works in the Minneapolis-St. Paul region. We had a delightful conversation about Nöel Coward and his significance in modern theater. I have with me now someone who has a great deal of experience in Nöel Coward, and he's going to help me talk about Nöel Coward's play Present Laughter, which is coming to the 1891 Fredonia Opera House as part of the Arts in the Afternoon, and it is a recorded production featuring Andrew Scott from 2019 at the National Theatre in London, actually what they call the Old Vic. And I want to welcome in Craig Johnson. Craig is an adjunct professor at the University of Minnesota, where he directs and teaches in the BFA program, and he's also a member of the Twin Cities theater community, having worked in such locations as Jungle Theater, History Theater, the Park Square Theater, and Latte Da, which does musicals as well. So, Craig, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you, Tom.
So let's sort of dive right into it, because Nöel Coward is one of the icons of mid-20th century theater, particularly in the United Kingdom, and perhaps you could just shed a little background for those of the audience who are not quite that familiar. I've heard the name, but don't really know how prominent he was.
Right, I would be happy to. Noel Coward is really one of my favorites, and a lot of people's, because he was one of the great theatrical figures of the 20th century, really defining a lot of the different styles that were prominent for decades after decade. And a number of his plays, including like Present Laughter, are still done today. He was born right before the turn of the century. I think like in mid-December, so that's why the name Noel comes out, from Noel or Christmas time. And so he grew up as a child actor in London. And then when he was in his 20s, he really started writing in addition to being a performer and started composing. And he just continued at a phenomenal rate. I think he has close to 50 published plays, a number of musicals that he wrote, a lot of sketches and reviews, hundreds of songs, of course, populating those. And he was also did a little bit of film and appeared as a cabaret artist then a little bit later in his career, incredibly, performing in Las Vegas then, where he was just like this icon of just like an earlier British time period. So he just epitomized this sort of like, even though he wasn't necessarily upper class, he sort of epitomized that upper crust sort of British style of the 20s, 30s, and 40s. The image of him is always like in a tux, maybe holding a martini and a cigarette holder, with a cigarette lit. And just spouting off witty clipped bon mot, and other little witticisms for people. So people would know him from a lot of different areas like that. Though today, we probably know him best not only from just that persona, but from this handful of really beautifully crafted light comedies, of which Present Laughter is a great example.
Yeah, he's I find his sort of persona so fascinating in terms of the fact that he was um so stylish. I mean, the man never went anywhere without being dressed properly. He never, was in society without having incredibly witty things to say. How did someone like that, who came from his background, manage to develop that kind of style for himself?
I think just being around the theatrical milieu since he was just a child, so he was always just like the child actor where there was a great star who might be, and it was just from looking at and emulating them and just soaking it up throughout his whole life. I think really one of the things that's really interesting about his kind of style and work is like, even though he sort of represents this kind of stylish establishment, in another sense, he was also a rule breaker. He was really kind of an angry young man a little bit in his day, and his plays kind of reflect that sort of smashing of an older order since he like came into his own in the 1920s. And that was right after World War One. So if you look at his plays and compare them to other wonderful playwrights like Oscar Wilde and George Bernard Shaw, who wrote marvelous comedies, British comedies as well, but theirs are more fulsome, rhetorical, with more elaborate kind of sentence structure. But when you get to Noel Coward, and he was the leader of this pack, that everything is just suddenly pared away. So it's very clipped and it's very brief, and the witticisms just pound back and forth, just like a little game of ping pong or something like that. So in a sense, sort of like all the fat has suddenly been trimmed away, and you just have this very lithe, elegant kind of writing that's just much more synonymous with a lot of 20th, what we think of as 20th century writers. So that even somebody like really who's really quite different from him, like Edward Albee, the author of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and so many other plays, would point back to Coward as someone just like, oh, that's how you write dialogue. You can just keep going and going and going and going like that if you just keep the plates spinning, the balls in the air like that.
Yeah,
And that's what he did peerlessly.
it's fascinating. A lot of his plays are called comedy of manners because of the way in which the characters also exist in that particular kind of societal milieu,
Yeah.
and also farces too. So it's this kind of interesting combination. And Present Laughter, I think, reflects both of those, doesn't it?
Yeah, it certainly does. So it follows that sort of just like upper crust theatrical self-awareness, this kind of self-conscious, sort of just like over the top, sort of grandiose kind of acting that Coward manages to both embrace and satire and satirize at the same time. But then there's always enough plot just to keep things spinning again too. So there's a situational comedy matched with a verbal comedy, which is really pretty wonderful. And probably his most famous play these days is Blythe's Spirit, which he wrote just right after Present Laughter too. And that also really combines a really good farcical element and plot structure along with the kind of witticisms that we're talking about.
Now, Present Laughter as a play, a lot of people seem to think is a bit autobiographical. The main character, Gary Essendine, is about to take off on a tour of a play through Africa of all places,
Yeah.
and it's and he's getting all kinds of sorts of nervous about this, and his inner circle is coming in, and he's at the same time fraught with nerves, but he's still got that persona of I'm a mega star, and basically the play revolves around young women coming in and going out, his ex-wife coming in and going out, his manager coming in and going out, and he has to keep all these balls going on, which makes it quite humorous.
Yeah, it really does. It's a good example of how well crafted his plays are. So he just has this great sort of setup of all these different people who come and go, and then the plot keeps turning on itself, and different relationships get revealed in different ways too, and it just builds to a really nice, frothy comic head on it as the play rolls along.
Yeah, something about Coward in historically in this play, he was ready to tour it, and then World War II broke out and the theaters closed, so he had to wait. But before he brought it to London, he toured it for like 16 weeks in the what they call the provinces or around the UK. Was there any particular reason why he did that, do you think?
Well, it's because the theaters were closed in London, of course. So he wasn't able to do that. I think he had a phrase like the West End, London's Broadway. He said, the the provinces can't come to the West End now because the theaters are closed. So the West End is going to go to the provinces. So it was a way of sort of fulfilling his war duties. Kind of like a well-known story about him is when the war broke out, he went right to Winston Churchill because, of course, he's no coward. He would go to the prime minister, just like all of us would, oh, for goodness sake, in any event. So he goes to Winston Churchill and offers his services. And Winston Churchill very appropriately said, your job is to get out there and sing and act and entertain the troops and keep morale up. So the Present Laughter tour is a great example of that, where he would just take a show to people who would otherwise not be able to see him, to give them some relief from the horrors of World War II that were being inflicted on the UK at that time. And he then went out and performed sort of in concert, cabaret, doing musical theater songs for the troops. And then he, like I said, he then later wrote Blythe's Spirit, which is, of course, a comedy about death that performed for nearly 2,000 performances in London in the middle of World War II. An extraordinary achievement, all of these plays.
Yeah, he was an indefatigable tourer of his plays, entertaining the troops and all of that during wartime. It's really quite a remarkable record. Um, he was very good at not only directing his own plays, but acting in them, which is kind of unusual.
It astonishes me. I work as an actor. I work as a director, but the idea of continually directing yourself and just being in charge of a production while also playing a leading role in it is an almost impossible task. I'm just amazed that he not only did it once, but he did it like all the time.
All the
So
time.
yeah, so he knew exactly what he wanted from the moment that he wrote the play, what it should sound like, what it should look like, who he wanted to be in it, how to put the whole production together. And he managed to do that again and again. Now, I think shows at that time, in some ways, sort of scenically and technically, were a little bit simpler than the way we might present them today. But nonetheless, he did it time after time. So he was an accomplished performer and director and playwright.
Yeah, I see you shaking your head because he's amazing, and
Yeah.
I can see you like him. Of all of the works that you have done, and you've done several Noel Coward plays, which are your favorites?
I've done about 10 productions of Noel Coward plays. Um, Blithe Spirit the most. Weirdly, I've never done Present Laughter. It's always escaped me, so I'm so glad to be here talking with you about it. At least I can get that in. I've had wonderful times doing Design for Living,
Hmm.
and and I also directed a production of Fallen Angels, which is not as well known, but it's hilariously funny. I think it's really deserves a good revival, and it has wonderful roles for women in it. So there isn't really a sort of quote unquote Noel Coward kind of figure or character in that one too. But that's really fun. So that's a little kind of near and dear to my heart since it's a little less known.
That I didn't even I've heard the title, but I've never really seen that. So you're right, it really is quite unknown.
Mhm.
Um, I think I'm gonna wrap up just a little bit because I want to ask you if you have any inside information or apparently Noel Coward over and over again in his plays ended them with a couple tiptoeing out the door at the end of the play, some little theatrical trick. Is there anything to that you're aware of that's why Noel Coward chose to do that?
You are absolutely right that that is a trick or a trope that he uses in a number of his plays, where on stage you'll have maybe a group of minor characters continuing to squabble, 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 whereas the lead characters, the people that we've really fallen in love with, the Noel Coward character, and usually the leading lady often, will just go, just as you say, quietly tiptoeing out the door on to new adventures, sort of leaving the normal people to live their normal, squabbling, realistic kind of lives too, while they go floating off to other kind of glamorous adventures. Now, I don't know if Noel really addressed that or if anyone has given a really suitable explanation for it, but it happens again and again. That idea of just like, no, I'm just going to slip away. I'm not going to be involved in your day to day bickering and trials and tribulations.
Well, considering that, I have to tell my audiences that we're actually recording this on St. Patrick's Day, so this is the classic Irish goodbye, is it not?
There we are. Yes. Yeah.
And I didn't know Noel Cowell was Irish. I don't think he is, but boy, he surely knew that, and it's an interesting gimmick, I think, to really it's just that one of those little things that sometimes a theater artist will do to just put a button on their career, a little identifying mark.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And Tom, that kind of reminds me of there was another thing in Present Laughter that I just love, and I use this in teaching a lot. The way he constructs his plays, and the people, if they see the Andrew Scott version, and they're going to enjoy that, it's really remarkable. To take a look at Act Two, Scene One, which ends with Joanna and Gary, two main characters getting together, and we've just been waiting as an audience. It's like those two are going to get it. Something's going to happen. They're going to be together, and so they finally do after a big, long, intimate scene, and they're sinking down into the sofa together. But instead of doing just like a classic build or a classic love scene, what Noel Coward does is have them discuss the different concert halls in London and what makes their acoustics best. So they're just like, as they slowly get closer and closer and are going into an embrace. So they're saying, like, oh, I was at the Elizabeth Hall. Oh, I find that very imposing. I prefer the Albert Hall. Surely not when they play Hiawatha. I won't hear another word against the Albert Hall. And the lights go to black and they're in an embrace on the sofa. So it's just that kind of technical marvel that is just like this light little soap bubble of a scene, too. But he inverts that normal tropes and uses that in a very just wonderfully exquisite, witty way. And that's why I love Noel Coward.
And that's a perfect way to just kind of end the interview because I that's a charming story and and you tell it well. So listen, Craig, thank you so much for the time you've given me all the way out there in the Twin Cities area. I really, really do appreciate your coming on the podcast, and you've been a delightful guest. So thanks for your time and your expertise. Much appreciated.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, hopefully we get to do this again for some reason. I'd like
I
that.
hope so. Yeah,
Uh,
that would be great.
Great. Thanks, Craig. So long.
Bye now.
Present Laughter by Noel Coward will be presented as part of the Arts in the Afternoon series on Saturday, April 5th at 1 p.m. Tickets are $15 for adults and $10 for students. Call the box office at 716-679-1891 for tickets or go online at www.fredopera.org/tickets.
5 miles of Elmwood.
5 miles of Ellum.
Yeah.
Y'all ready?
All right.
How about a
The Folk and Fredonia series, sponsored by the Gilman family, is bringing in the Long Point String Band from the hills and hollers of West Virginia. The band features a blend of old-timey music infused with bluegrass flair and has been collecting hidden songs from the Appalachian region. I spoke with Lars Swanson, the group's bass player, to get a sense of their musical sound. I did not realize when I first signed up Lars Swanson to do this interview for the Long Point String Band that he was such an accomplished musician. Not only is he part of the Long Point String Band playing the upright bass with old-timey music and a little bluegrass flair there, but he's also a jazz musician too. He's got a master's degree, adjunct professor at Marshall University in West Virginia. So Lars, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, I'm real happy to be here, Tom. Thanks for having me.
So let's talk a little bit about Long Point String Band first, and we'll get into some of the details about some of the other things you got going on later on. But as far as the band is concerned, as far as I can tell, you guys are not quite bluegrass. You're a little bit old-timey music, and perhaps you could talk a little bit about how you fuse and meld the two of those to create your sound.
Yeah, absolutely. So we draw a lot of inspiration and repertoire from a lot of bluegrass music and from a lot of old time music as well. But the techniques, like the practice that we use in playing it, like the mountain dulcimer is definitely something you consider an old time instrument or a folk instrument as opposed to a bluegrass instrument. And that's what I think is a real difference for us and why we call ourselves more neo traditional old time as opposed to bluegrass, like old timey bluegrass. Even though we have that bluegrass flair, the style also, our dulcimer player Hunter Walker doubles on banjo, and he plays the claw hammer banjo, which is one of the distinctly different things that separates kind of old time music and bluegrass music. So a lot of it comes in the practice of just purely the technique, the instrumental tradition that we employ.
Yeah, you got four musicians. You're a four-person group, and as you said, you got Hunter Walker there on the mountain dulcimer. I was watching him play that, I couldn't quite tell when I first saw it what it was, and then all of a sudden I said, "Wait a minute, that's a mountain dulcimer." I never quite heard a band incorporate that into bluegrass. I don't think.
Well, and he makes it easy because I could say pretty unequivocally that he's probably the best mountain dulcimer player in the world. There's really no one who plays that instrument quite like he does. It's just amazing to hear.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
the reason it caught me by surprise was because the way he holds it. He almost plays it like a dobro in a sense, gets it on his lap and plays it that way. And the angle of the video that I saw didn't quite give me a look at his fingering, but it's probably pretty unique.
He has these pretty amazing double jointed thumbs, so he's able to get a really extra reach when he goes for certain notes and stuff. It's a really cool technique.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. What made you choose the upright bass? You're a big man. You got a big instrument. What do you like so much about playing the upright bass in the group?
Well, I've come to really like the physicality of it. It's a really big instrument, and when you play it, you can't help but dance with it while you play. So and I was always interested in jazz, kind of growing up. I played saxophone in band and stuff. Um, But the essence of that music, it's in the horns and stuff, but really the bass is kind of going on throughout. I played a little bit of electric bass, and I got mixed in with like a youth orchestra kind of crowd. And I played a little electric bass with them and some saxophone, and they're like, "Oh, well, you're big, you can play upright bass." So that kind of got me hooked onto upright bass first. So it was just kind of assigned to me, by my size and my ability to play a different kind of bass.
Yeah.
But then it really took me getting into college, and I'd say both of these things happened at the same time. One, there were way too many saxophone players at my college and not enough bass players, so I got put on bass again, assigned, which
Mhm.
was fine with me. I like playing that instrument. Um, and then I went to high school with Hunter Walker, and we didn't really play very much old time music when I was in school. We played a few jams together, and he got me kind of the bug going in my head a little bit, just like I knew the jams were fun, and he'd invite me sometimes, and I'd go. But I got the bug to just kind of start playing music. At the same time, I'd started really switching to bass more seriously in college. And Hunter had just happened to post on Facebook that he was looking for like a bass player to come play full time. I was like, yeah, I messaged him. I was like, hey, I'm looking to play more music. I want to come play bass. And he was like, yeah, just come to a jam. And ever since I went to that jam, Hunter and Lewis and Brian have just been teaching me how to play old time for 10 years since then.
Wow.
So it's been really great, like the synthesis of that.
So I figured you've been playing for about 10 years now, from what I can tell. How'd you all decide to get together and keep playing?
You know, Hunter and Brian had been playing music together, I think, for a year before Lewis and I really joined on with the group. I know he got in there first, and then they had another bass player named Barbara Rosner, who's a very good bass player who kind of floats around Kentucky and Pennsylvania and West Virginia. But was just moving out of the area, and it was just a good twist of fate. But we've just always, I feel like we've had a really good local momentum for a number of years. We've always had kind of good places that have been willing to kind of host us over and over again. That helped us go for a long time and develop a sound. We have a live album. That's our last release that we had that we recorded at one of those places we usually play at. It's called the Weatherground Brewery. They make delicious beer there, and they've always been kind to us. We played there pretty much since they opened. Um, so the music is really rooted in the community of the area in a major way. And so, well, we have now this opportunity coming up to New York and getting around some more with the Mid Atlantic tours,
Hmm.
which is it's a program through Mid Atlantic Arts, which kind of brings these folk art kind of things to more communities, like gets grant funded tours happening. So they we're very fortunate that they cold emailed us and asked us to apply. It was great. It really couldn't have worked out better. So we went through that, and that's really just been great. So even with all the community support and all the stuff, it had been 8 years, and it just starts. We're all 8 years older now than we were before. It gets harder to carry around all the sound equipment to whatever hauler we have to drive into. So it's just less and less appealing to go out as you get older, just very honestly.
Yeah.
But this has been really good and really reinvigorating, to see what more this can turn into, and what we can do by bringing this out to more communities. It's been really fun.
Yeah, we're certainly looking forward to have you. We like having a lot of these bluegrass, old time music groups over at the 1891 Fredonia Opera House. The Gilman family concert series really does a great job for the Folk and Fredonia Festival. So, it's really nice for us. You guys play the kind of music a lot of people like to hear. So listen, you guys are the Long Point String Band, and I know we have a state park here in the region called Long Point State Park, and I see the similarities. So tell me a little bit about how you got to be called the Long Point String Band.
We also have a Long Point state trail. It's a trail that takes you. It's about 2 miles long in Fayetteville, West Virginia. That takes you out to about the best view you can get of the New River Gorge Bridge, which is about the it's the I think it's the tallest arch bridge in our hemisphere. So it's a pretty awesome thing to see. So overspanning the whole gorge, real long. It's a beautiful, beautiful view. So I think it's kind of representative of the area. It was a good reason to choose for the name, you know.
Oh yeah, because that probably everybody in your region recognizes the Long Point Trail and the view. I think I probably have a little bit of acrophobia. Not sure I'd want to cross that bridge, but
Oh yeah, no. You know that they close down that bridge to traffic every year, and they have something called Bridge Day in one lane of it, where they set up vendors and they have people who jump off of it.
oh my
Like
God.
they do base jumping off of the bridge, and
Wow.
it's a sight to see. I could not do that, but it's pretty spectacular to watch, and you're up close and stuff. It's pretty wild to see.
Yeah, I don't think I could do that either.
Yeah.
Yeah. So listen, you mentioned you guys had an album a few years back, and I know that you got another album coming out, and it's going to be kind of a project album, picking up some old-time musicians that haven't been recorded yet. Tell me a little bit about that.
We applied for a grant from the National Coal Heritage Association to work on a new record, and this was all inspired. The synthesis of this record came from Brian Bell, our guitar player. He wanted to record a tune called "The Beckley Rag," which is a old recording by it was written by a man named Roy Harvey, and it played with Leonard Copeland as well. They both play guitars on it, and it's a real cool little recording. But that just kind of started spinning the wheels of like, huh, there's all these old tunes that people have never heard of, and all these old pickers that play these great tunes that were influential to some people who knew them, but don't necessarily have the broad, sweeping coverage of people like your Ed Haley, other folks in that regard, you know, who have had come to light and now have had a lot of work kind of made for them. And so we have engaged with a lot of sources. There's the Augusta Heritage Center based in Elkins, West Virginia, that has a lot of great recorded material. They have the Jerry Milnes collection. You know, he went around and taped a lot of old pickers. So we found some really good recordings that he did in our area. Some kind of I just call it. Some people might call it West Virginia graveyard music. You know, we have some old ballads from a guy named Holly Hunley out of Fayette County. Got some good fiddle tunes from Monroe County. There's a recording of a guy named Mose Kaufman. Uh, he was another great influential fiddle player. There's not a lot of recordings of him. He just kind of played for fun, but he showed so many people how to play so many tunes. Um, so we're fortunate to be able to pick up some of his tunes that he played and try to re-record them and put some new life into them. And obviously, we kind of went around in the hollers and the hills too, and we picked up some old tunes that way. You know, got some field recordings and talked to some folks and found some tunes that we thought were qualified as lost. You know, there aren't any real good fresh recordings of them out yet or anything. You know, so we're really excited to bring all these tunes back to life. It's been a really cool process to kind of work with this lost material and find it again, bring it back out, and get it into the ears. We're going to have a release event for that for the tunes at least. I think we plan to get the record done. We're still on track to have this released by the time we get to Fredonia. So hopefully this will all be available by the time we're playing, which will be great. Get those tunes in, really start working them into the repertoire, and we'll be playing them all for you by the time we get up there. So that'll be awesome.
Oh, that's nice. We'll have a lot of nice fresh material up there.
Yeah.
That's great. Going to be a very fresh concert. That's wonderful. I mean, I know you guys live in the, a gold mine there in the Appalachians for all that kind of music. So it'll be looking forward to do that. Any plans for the future of the band? Where do you see you guys going in 5 years or so?
Yeah, I think right now with this momentum we have from this project, we would like to continue to get these lost tunes to more places, get around some more on the, Eastern Seaboard, get all around the area, trying to play some more tunes and getting these tunes like not just exposed and back into our community, but getting into other communities too, will be really great. And then, beyond that, we've been doing this for 10 years. So it's just keeping that momentum alive, still playing, still keeping fresh. Hopefully we can get some kind of new seed synergy like we got with someone says, oh, I want to record this one tune. And then we get this whole project out of it. It's really amazing how just one simple idea can keep something going for so long. And, it's just little things like that have been great. But it feels good to be at a point where we can say, oh, yes, we've got this project done. We can finally share this material with more people instead of having to worry about what the next thing's going to be. We have a good set of engagements and material set up now, so it's good.
Life
Good
sounds pretty
feeling.
good for you, Lars.
That's good. Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
It's always good to be able to get the music out and tour. Now, don't do so much touring that you wear yourself out now. But thanks for bringing all that old timey music, back to us. It's really nice to keep that history alive and bring it back with some recordings and make sure that it doesn't get lost into history, but we still have it. Listen, I'm going to let you go. I know you're very busy. You're doing a lot of different things with your life now. So take care. We'll see you when you get to the Opera House. It's great talking to you.
Tom, great talking to you, man. I appreciate it.
Okay, great. Thanks
Yeah.
a lot. We'll see you soon, Lars. Bye.
Bye-bye.
The Long Point String Band will be live in concert at the 1891 Fredonia Opera House on Friday, April 11th, starting at 7:30 p.m. Tickets are $22 for adults, $20 for members, $10 for students, and $5 measly for you SUNY Fredonia students. So come on out. Tickets can be purchased at the box office at 716-679-1891 or online at www.fredopera.org/tickets. Come on out for some of that old-timey music goodness. Here is the arts calendar for April 2nd through April 16th. The cinema series continues at the Opera House with 2 films. The first is Last Breath, a heart-pounding film that follows seasoned deep-sea divers as they battle the raging elements to rescue their crewmate trapped hundreds of feet below the ocean's surface. Starring Woody Harrelson, Simu Liu, and Finn Cole, the film screens on Saturday, April 5th and Tuesday, April 8th at 7:30 p.m. And just in time for the 2025 baseball season, the baseball movie Ephus, about 2 recreational baseball teams in New England playing their last game against each other, will screen on Saturday, April 12th and again on Tuesday, April 15th at 7:30 p.m. Tickets are $7 for adults, $6.50 for members, and $5 for students, and can be purchased at the door on the night of the screening only. Van Gogh, Poets and Lovers, a documentary on the life and work of the Impressionist master Vincent van Gogh, will be presented as an Arts in the Afternoon event on Saturday, April 12th, beginning at 1 p.m. The documentary explores the artist's years in the south of France, where he revolutionized his style. Tickets are $15 for adults and $10 for students. Here's a rundown of what's happening at the School of Music. Unless otherwise noted, all events are in the Rausch Recital Hall, begin at 8 p.m., and are free and open to the public. The percussion ensembles perform on Monday, April 7th. The New Horizon Band performs in the King Concert Hall beginning at 6:30 p.m. on Tuesday, April 8th. The Woodwind Chamber Ensembles perform on Tuesday, April 8th. The Fredonia Chamber Orchestra performs on Wednesday, April 9th. The Chambermaid Guitars perform on Thursday, April 10th. The World Mallet Ensembles perform on Friday, April 11th. The Fredonia Wind Symphony performs on Tuesday, April 15th, and the Fredonia Concert Band performs on Wednesday, April 16th. The Lakeshore Center for the Arts will have its monthly open mic session on Thursday, April 3rd from 7:30 to 9:30 p.m., and the Songwriter Circle series will feature 4 local singer-songwriters on Thursday, April 17th, beginning at 7:30 p.m. Tickets for the Songwriters Circle are $10 and can be purchased on the Lakeshore Center for the Arts website. Finally, the Darwin Barker Library will feature an author talkback session with local author Daner Burkhardt as he discusses his new book, Coaster's Rule, a fantasy fiction novel featuring merfolk, a villainous overlord, and a young woman. The talk is scheduled for Saturday, April 12th, beginning at 12 noon in the Barker Library. The event is free and open to the public. And remember, if you have an arts event you'd like mentioned on the arts calendar, please contact us at the Opera House at 716-679-1891 or email us at operahouse@fredopera.org. Please give us at least a month's notice of your event in advance to ensure a timely listing.
Yes, Miss Brandon?
Why, I shouldn't have written you as I did, Mr. Holmes, and then burst in this melodramatic way. but I had to see you.
Oh, that doesn't matter, Miss Brandon. There's no more resolutely informal household in all London than mine.
You're very kind.
Not at all. Only I don't understand why you wish to consult me about a garden party. You couldn't possibly find a worse guide to social etiquette.
It's because my brother and Gerald Hunter, he's the family solicitor, insist on my going. And I don't want to. I don't want to.
Yes, but how should I know how to advise you, Miss Brandon?
Perhaps you should do as your brother and family solicitor suggest. Lady Conningham is eminently respectable.
No. Oh, Mr. Holmes, I'm so frightened.
What are you frightened of, Miss Brandon?
Murder.
If you're a Sherlock Holmes fan, and let's face it, who isn't, then it's elementary that you're going to enjoy the next concert presented by the Western New York Chamber Orchestra. Music director Maestro Glen Cortese has composed a new opera about Sherlock Holmes and his partner John Watson, entitled 221B, a Sherlock Holmes opera, and will be presenting the concert premiere of the work on Sunday, April 6th at 3 p.m. in King Concert Hall. Maestro Cortese was kind enough to spare a few minutes out of his busy schedule to talk with me about his new composition. With me now, I think, is probably one of the hardest working men in the world of classical music today, and that is Maestro Glen Cortese. He is the musical director of the Western New York Chamber Orchestra, and they'll be giving a concert on April 6th, Sunday, April 6th at 3 p.m., and it's going to feature a new opera written by Maestro Cortese himself. So, Glen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tom. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's really fun to have you. You've been quite busy. I know the Western New York Chamber Orchestra has also been quite busy too. You've done already a couple of concerts, one in the fall, an All-American concert, which you took to Erie, Pennsylvania. In February, you premiered a new work by young composer Mark Migaud, and that was pretty successful. So things are going well for Winneco these days, yes?
Yes, and that's one of three orchestras that I'm artistic director of right now. So I'm usually on the run quite a bit.
Yeah, you're with three orchestras, and I think you're also the conductor emeritus someplace in Oregon, and you're just
Yeah.
You're all over the place, man. So let's talk about this concert real quick coming up on April 6th. It is entitled 221B, a Sherlock Holmes opera, and you are the composer. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm very familiar with you, obviously, as a conductor, having worked with you before, but your work as a composer is quite lengthy, and I think it's something people don't really quite know about you. So let's talk a little bit about this opera. It has kind of an interesting title. I've been intrigued ever since I saw the title. So how did this all come about?
Well, this idea is sort of 20 years in the making. I had an idea a long time ago to write a Sherlock Holmes opera. I've always been a huge fan of the stories, and in 2011, commission almost happened for this, and it sort of fell through. And then sort of right after the COVID started to wind down, I was discussing this idea with a stage director that I worked with a lot out at University of Northern Colorado when I was with the Greeley Philharmonic out there, telling him about this idea for a Sherlock Holmes opera. He loved the idea. He's also a librettist, and we talked to some folks at the University of Northern Colorado, and they commissioned the piece. The world premiere of the fully staged version is this coming November, and it was supposed to be last November, and everything sort of got pushed by a year because of some internal issues there about how they wanted to staff it and so forth. So they agreed that I could do a concert premiere prior to that, which is what we're doing with Winneco. So there's no staging, there's no costumes for this. It's just a concert premiere of the music, and it will represent the story.
Now, when we're talking about a concert premiere, you do have vocalists, I assume?
Oh yeah, it's the full cast is there and the chorus with the full orchestra. It's just that there's no staging or costumes or stage action. It's just done in concert.
Yeah, okay, understood. So what about the title, 221B? Where is that from?
Well, 221B Baker Street is the address that Holmes and Watson shared rooms at when they were working together. And I thought that would be kind of an evocative title for this piece. The story is a story that I came up with, and then Brian Ludloff, who is the librettist and will also be the stage director for the fully staged premiere, fleshed it out as the librettist. So we set the story in the Holmes lore in a place that actually makes sense. If you know the Holmes stories, he wrote them from 1887 to 1893 for the Strand magazine. That was the magazine that was publishing them. And in a story called The Final Problem, which was written in 1893 but set in the story in 1891, Doyle killed off Sherlock Holmes. He has a fight with Professor John Moriarty. They go over the Reichenbach Falls together, and that's presumably the end of Sherlock Holmes. Well, the reaction from the public was so surprising to Doyle. They wrote letters to the Strand magazine. The magazine almost went out of business. 20,000 people canceled their subscriptions because Sherlock Holmes was gone. And he even got letters from individuals protesting the fact that he had killed Sherlock Holmes. One lady began the letter with, "You brute." And legend has it that Londoners were so distraught about hearing this news that they wore black armbands in mourning for this fictional character. So he was very much loved by the public, and eventually, this pressure 8 years later, Doyle started to write some more stories. So we find out that Holmes did not die when he went over the falls, but he hid himself from public view for a while to make sure that his other enemies weren't looking for him and so forth. So he starts to write more stories, and then eventually, in a story called The Final Bow, Holmes decides to retire, and he retires to a bee farm out in the country. And then there's a couple more stories that are set after that in his retirement. There's I think 2 other stories that happen after that. And what we did was we created this, I'm using air quotes now, fictional character, because they're all fictional, but in the Holmes lore, an additional character who's presumably Watson's niece. And this story is set right before he retires. So Watson's niece is a young lady who is interested in criminology and forensics, and she begs her uncle John Watson to have an audience with Sherlock Holmes to try to become his apprentice. And it's their relationship that is focused on in this story. I guess I'll give away the story. Is this going to be aired before the premiere?
Yes, just a little bit. We want to make sure we get a little publicity for you.
I will not give it all away then, because it's a whodunit, and I don't want to give away the answer. But the premise is that this young woman meets Sherlock Holmes, apprentices with him, and becomes a very important part of his life, and then in the end, a reason for his retirement. So, and I won't give away any more than that, because that will spoil the whodunit part of the story. But it's a story more than just a mystery whodunit. It's about human nature too, and how oftentimes, if we're not looking at what's going on around us, if we're too mono-focused on things, we miss things in our lives. We can't see the forest through the trees. So that's sort of the moral of the story. But there are some of the favorite Holmes characters. The villainous Irene Adler makes an appearance. John Moriarty makes an appearance. Of course, we have Watson. We have a younger version of Watson because a lot of the opera is done in flashback.
Oh, okay.
So we're seeing things that happened in the past, and I'll come back to that in a second. We, of course, have Mrs. Hudson, the housekeeper, Inspector Lestrade, the police inspector that Holmes often deals with. But I think I did something in this opera. I haven't found it anywhere else in opera in general, where in this flashback, one of the many that Watson has about his first Christmas with Sherlock Holmes, he's remembering that. And we see the younger version of himself in the flashback. And they start to sing together about this Christmas. So older Watson is singing about it in the present, and younger Watson singing about it in the past. So I think it's the first time in operatic history someone sang a duet with themselves. And what I did was, in the first stanza of this, they sing together. And then I thought about our memories, how we think of things in the past. And as we get further away from events, our memory changes and adjusts based on our life experience often. So we're remembering it different than maybe it actually happened. So then they're singing together breaks off and is divergent because Watson in the present is remembering the past, and Watson in the past is in the past. So their duet becomes divergent rather than singing absolutely in unison together. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way to portray the fact that our memory in the present of the past is different than what actually happened back then. Eventually, that same music turns into a quartet with other people in the room, but it's a unique feature, I think, of this piece. All these flashbacks that tell the story in the past and also in the present at the same time.
That is quite fascinating, and it's funny because as you're talking, I'm sort of trying to conceive what that would sound like in my head. Obviously, I've never heard the music that you've written, but I think of all of the things that you can do with the music. It could be discordant. It could be, the harmonics are not exactly correct. What a fascinating concept, though. I would look forward to hearing something like that. That's unique.
I think it's a very different story. It's an interesting story. The character is very, very well loved. I would call it a mystery. There's also a few comical aspects to it, but they're more dark comedy than anything else than that. The sound world that I created for this is a pretty dark, mysterious sound world. Not only because Sherlock Holmes mysteries are mysteries, but I was also, looking at London in the day, in the late 1800s, early 1900s. This was a coal-fired city to live in. There was this thick cloud of smoke over it. Oftentimes, the streets were kind of filthy all the time because horse-drawn carriages were the main kind of mode of transportation before the automobile came in. So it was probably a kind of a dark place in a lot of ways to live. Not meaning that the people were dark, but just the general feel of the area. So I tried to capture that in the mystery and the darkness of the music.
What kind of, you have a full orchestration for this? What's the orchestration like?
It's actually not a big orchestra. It's single woodwinds, one flute, one oboe, one clarinet, and one bassoon, and they all double. So the flute doubles on piccolo when it's needed, oboe on English horn, clarinet on bass clarinet, and bassoon on contrabassoon. Contrabassoon is a sound I really love in the orchestra, that very deep, dark voice. Then there are two horns, one trumpet, and one trombone. So it's not a symphony-sized brass section. It's a chamber orchestra-sized brass section. Two percussionists, a harp, a keyboard player who plays piano, harpsichord, and celeste at different times in the piece, and then strings. So I would call it a chamber orchestra, a pit-sized orchestra. But I tried to get as much color and range out of that ensemble as I possibly could.
Yeah, well, that will make it hopefully in the future fairly easy to stage. Should you be able to get it to go to different locations? I'm sure you're
I hope
probably,
so.
yeah, looking to move it around. And what about the voices? What kind of voices are you using?
Well, the young girl Abigail is a lyric soprano. Mrs. Hudson is a mezzo. She's a little bit older woman, so I wanted to represent her that way. Irene Adler, the villainess, is what the Germans call a Zwischenfach role, so it could be done by a mezzo or a heavier soprano, and that's just to offset her from Abigail in terms of the voice color. John Watson is a baritone, not a bass baritone, a real baritone. It's the tessitura lies high. Lestrade, the inspector, is a bass baritone. Moriarty, the villain, is a bass, and then young Watson is a tenor. So his younger version has a little bit higher voice when he was younger. So those are the voice types, and then there's a small choral ensemble of about it could be anywhere from 12 to 16 people in the ensemble.
Nice. That's a nice compact piece of music. I really think that's probably going to be very interesting. What in terms of thinking a little bit more in the future, are you going to be using this particular production and then sort of taking it back for yourself to say, oh, this worked well. I need to polish this a little bit. Do you foresee doing any future work on it before the full world premiere comes around?
Probably some. I mean, I don't think there'll be any major revisions. The one wonderful thing about digital notation now is you can really hear everything played back pretty accurately. So you really get a sense of exactly what a piece is like in terms of sound, time lanes, proportion. I'm sure we're going to find a few little tweaks here and there. I've done multiple proofreadings of this thing, and I'm still finding little errors or changes to make here and there. But I don't think it'll be anything major. I think it'll be little minor things that we adjust, dynamics, maybe the length of a note here or there, but nothing too major at this point. I hope not, at least. I was
Well,
kidding with some friends. When I got the last bunch of orchestra parts extracted and proofread and sent out, which was actually 2 weeks ago today. I packed them up and shipped them up to our librarian, Brian Walnicki, with the Western New York Chamber Orchestra. And I thought, God, they finally cut the lock and chain off the door at 221 Baker Street and let me out after 1 year, 8 months, and 4 days of working on this. And I mean, it was an amazing experience and a journey. It's just when you're working on an opera, it's in your face every day, even the days that you literally don't have time to work on it because of travel or concerts or whatever it might be. You're still thinking about it. And now I'm thinking about it in a different way. I'm preparing to conduct the premiere of the concert version, but that's kind of a different level of involvement. It's a level of involvement as a performer and a conductor preparing a score. And I try at this point to separate from the score being my music, and that's just a piece of music that I have to prepare to work with the orchestra and get it ready for performance.
well, they always used to say in the theater, a person who conducts himself, who directs himself, is a fool. But I think you'll be able to. I think you'll be able to make that happen for yourself, Glenn. You're so multi-talented, and you've been around the block enough times. I'm sure you're going to get that together. Hey, can I ask you to touch a little bit too on the upcoming Commencement Eve Pops concert on Friday, May 16th? You're also going to be doing that with Winnie Co.
Yes, we kind of do that in a rotation about every other year, and this year we're doing Sound of Music in concert there. So that will be a fun project with the cast drawn from students at the SUNY Fredonia. So it should be a lot of fun to do that.
Yeah, I always really enjoyed those, and I enjoyed working with you on a couple of them. They're just so much fun to do. Listen, I wish you a lot of luck with 221B. It sounds like an amazing project, and I know that people who are going to come to the King Concert Hall over there at the Rockefeller Art Center will probably enjoy themselves. You are a champion of new music. I know you like to do and expose people to new composers, and just exposing the audience to yourself as a new composer with the new work must be a lot of fun.
It is, and I try to really keep not only my musical goals with this piece in mind, but also how to make it really engaging for the audience in a way that look, murder mysteries are always engaging, but I tried to keep this really engaging in a lot of different ways on a lot of different levels for people, intellectually, emotionally, and I hope that I've accomplished that with the music and the story.
Well, I'm sure you probably have, Glenn, as talented as you are. Thank you very much for stopping by. I appreciate it. Your time is valuable, and I appreciate the time you always give to the podcast. So thanks again, and good luck.
My pleasure, Tom. Thank you.
221B, a Sherlock Holmes opera, will be presented by the Western New York Chamber Orchestra on Sunday, April 5th at 3 p.m. in the King Concert Hall at the Rockefeller Arts Center. Tickets are $20 for adults, free for students with valid ID in advance, or $5 at the door, and can be purchased by calling the Fredonia campus box office Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at 716-673-3501 or online at www.fredonia.edu/tickets. It's time to announce the winner of last episode's giveaway. The pair of tickets to the Long Point String Band concert, as well as the $25 gift card for Central Station in Dunkirk, goes to longtime Opera House supporter Barbara Yoakum. She correctly answered the Willow Cabin Speech as the name of Viola's famous speech in Twelfth Night. This week's giveaway features a $25 gift card for Downtown Brew, as well as 2 tickets for the cinema series, which you can use for any upcoming movie you'd like. Just answer the following question correctly, and the prizes are yours. What is the name of the central character in Present Laughter, modeled after Nöel Coward himself? Send an email with the subject title Giveaway, and with the correct answer and your preferred contact information to operahouse@fredopera.org, and you'll be eligible to win. The deadline for all entries is noon on Saturday, April 12th, to be eligible to win. And don't forget our important fundraiser, the 1891 Run for the Opera House. This year's 5K Run Walk event will take place on Sunday, April 27th, beginning at 9 a.m. Sign up before April 15th for a free t-shirt. Registration is $25 prior to the race, $30 day of the race, $15 for students under 21. Please check out the link at the bottom of the show notes for this podcast for more information and to register for the run. If you can't participate in the run walk, then think about becoming an Opera House member, which requires no more effort than a few mouse clicks on the web page. Membership has its benefits, so join today.
Raindrops are falling on my head, and just like the guy whose feet are too big for his.
And that's it for this Rainforest edition of Notes from the Aisle Seat. My thanks to Craig Johnson, Lars Swanson, and Glen Cortese for being my guests on this episode. Notes from the Aisle Seat is a production of the 1891 Fredonia Opera House in Fredonia, New York. For more information on any of the Opera House's events, call the box office at 716-679-1891. Visit the website at www.fredopera.org or email at operahouse@fredopera.org. Notes from the Aisle Seat is available wherever you get your podcasts and also on the Opera House YouTube channel. If you like this podcast, please consider following us by clicking the follow button on our home website at aisleseat.podbean.com and spreading the word through your social media feeds. If you have an arts event you'd like featured on the podcast, why don't you drop us a line at operahouse@fredopera.org, and we'll see about featuring your event. Please try to give us a month's notice in advance, if possible, to facilitate timely scheduling. If you have any suggestions, comments, or criticisms of the podcast, just drop us a line at operahouse@fredopera.org. We'll be glad to receive your feedback. Our next episode will be available on Wednesday, April 16th, 2025. I'm Tom Laughlin, and until then, be safe out there and be kind to one another.